Hello and welcome to Off My Shelves. This episode we're going to be looking at this monster book next to me here, Absolute Planetary by Warren Ellis and John Cassaday. And yeah, we'll get underway. So first things first with this episode is almost like a kind of companion piece to another YouTube channel, and that's Comic Bound. Now, Adam over in Comic Bound is a big supporter of this channel, and I his, but he done an overview of this book comparing it to the omnibus version. Now, he has had a different experience to me in terms of the binding and everything on this book. So first and foremost, I'm going to start off with the build of this book, but before I get into too much detail, I'll leave it in the description below. Watch Adam's video as well, because there is two sides to this story, and I'll get to the reason why in a second now. So obviously it comes with this wonderful slipcase on the outside with fabulous art on both sides and even on the top, which is fabulous to see. And then inside the slipcase there is no dust jacket, but the book is beautifully bound in this very textured kind of matte feeling cover that's supposed to represent the Planetary guide itself. It's actually taken from one of the covers of the issues later on in the series. Now all these little parts that you see on the spine and on the front and the back and even the DC logo have all got texture and depth to them. They're all embossed in different ways. The book itself comes, like most Absolutes, with good old ribbon bookmark. And now to the most important bit, the binding itself. Now on Adam's look through this book, he kind of came to the same conclusions I did when I first had this book, that they had glued the binding and it was very, very tight. But as I started reading it, I stretched the spine of this book out a fair few times, and then there was a nice crack. Not a nasty crack, a nice crack. And the binding actually opened up and lifted up to reveal a lovely eye, and revealing the Absolute format in all its glory, really. What I think had happened is that I think they have overglued the paper to the binding itself, and some of that has seeped through and actually stuck itself down to the actual board at the bottom. So it's given the impression that it's glued. Now obviously that could have been more on one issue than on another. Mine kind of came free, fairly straightforward, just through use. I know another person that I saw on a Facebook group actually shoved a knife into the hole to loosen it up a bit, and that's up to you, whatever you want to do really. But certainly for me, the binding is perfect. I've got no issues whatsoever. But please definitely check out Adam's video, because like I say, some of these might have more glue, might have less glue. I don't know, because I haven't seen enough of these issues, how bad that problem is and how much that glue seeping through and keeping that spine taut to the boards is a problem. So definitely do a little bit of research and see if you can see other people's pictures and other people's views on it really. There's next to no gutter loss really, considering the sheer amount of pages in this book. I mean, it's a behemoth of a book. It's gigantic, particularly for an Absolute, which are typically quite slimlined comparison to, you know, Marvel omnibuses and things like that. But I was quite surprised how there is next to no gutter loss really in certain areas as soon as that binding came free. So to Planetary itself, Planetary kind of starts off with a great premise really. It starts with Chiquita Wagner going out and finding Elijah Snow, who is in this random cafe in the desert in America, and she wants to recruit him to be part of a 3-man team that forms the field team of Planetary. And Planetary being this organisation that makes it its business to go out and almost document the secret history of the world and the real goings on in the world. So everything's weird and wonderful, from ghosts to monsters to any type of science fiction you can come up with really. They document that, and then since 1925 they've been publishing a book called The Planetary Guide, and that's what the cover of this book is based on really. And so they've been publishing The Planetary Guide, which essentially is the real history of the world, and it's a unique repository of knowledge. And so they're not going out to stop problems happening, they're not going out to solve problems or save people, they're going out to gather information. They're very much kind of looking for information on everything they can. They call themselves mystery archaeologists really, because something happens and they'll investigate it and then put that information down on paper for future generations or for whoever to use it really. And so typically there's a 3-man team, and Elijah Snow, Chiquita Wagner and the drummer are the three-man team, but then there's a fourth man that you told about quite early on, which is the money man, and he basically funds all of the activities in Planetary, because it's this massive organisation that has offices all over the world, and so the field team go to these different offices, find out something's happening, like there might have been a ghost in Tokyo, or there might have been an island full of monsters. They go there and they discover that problem, and then sometimes they're dragged into it and they are actually reacting in real time to a problem. Sometimes the problem happened many years before they were even on the scene. It varies, but for me this book is perfect, really. I got no qualms in saying that whatsoever. From start to finish, it is a perfect read, really. If you're a fan of Hellboy, if you're a fan of the X-Files, if you're a fan of any kind of science fiction or kind of theatrical, mystical, you know, fantastical stories in comics and things like that, or in any medium, then this is definitely a book that you'll probably get a lot from. And the art by John Cassaday is just phenomenal. The covers are featured in full page spreads as well as you go through the book, and I love those as well because every single one of those is different from the last. No one single Planetary kind of cover is the same as before. Even the logo of Planetary kind of diversifies and changes all the time. So, and John Cassaday's art as well then changes inside to reflect the time period and the places that he is. I was stunned as well how well paced the story was. The story really doesn't just dive in and give you all the answers straight away. It's really, really finely paced, and minute details from the start blow up to be this gigantic, massive plot point later on. So you really have to be paying attention to certain parts. And yeah, it's Warren Ellis who's writing, and so it is confusing and is high concept at times, but by the end of the book and by the end of a few issues, you were pretty much satisfied, really, or at least I was. No matter how many times I kind of had to flick back through to reread a page because I didn't know what concept was going on, I didn't mind, really, because I was enjoying it so much. I didn't mind being confused by it at all. I think I'm quite a sadistic reader sometimes because I seem to quite enjoy the more confusing concepts, the ones that make me pay attention and force me to pay attention and pay close attention to the art and the written word simultaneously. And this book is definitely one of those. It's almost a book of two parts as well, because something happens to our main character, Elijah Snow, pretty much halfway through the story arc, really, and that changes him fundamentally. Something awakens in him and he changes to become this very confident and assured person, and it just goes into a different gear from there on in, really. Every issue of this is really standalone as well, which is kind of hit home by Josh Whedon's Afterward, and he says every issue is its own short, dazzling tale that would bind the reader even if they had no idea it was part of a larger whole. You could pretty much go through this book and pick a particular story out and you'll get something from it. And I was really impressed by that, how very few issues, I think only one issue actually, continues straight headlong from the previous one. All of the rest of them, yeah, there's this overarching story that continues through, but they very much feel like a start and end to a particular story while that overarching story is ticking over quite nicely. I should mention the Four as well, because the Four are this kind of overarching bad guy, if you will. If there is a big bad in the whole series, really, it's the Four, and this is kind of almost like an alternative take on the Fantastic Four, very similar to that, and he does that a few times, really. He's got an alternative take of the Lone Ranger, of Superman and various other characters from comics and from literature and things like that. That's another aspect that I loved, is that you get these kind of unique alternative takes on characters that you are very familiar with, but it's not kind of pastiche or done badly. It's done really well, and yeah, the Four are sadistic and horrible in every way, shape and form, and they are very much kind of a central part of the story, but it does go off in many tangents in many different directions as well, which is why I love it, to be honest. This is, for me, one of the best reads that I've had in a long time. I read parts of Planetary many years ago and only revisited it because I'm a little bit obsessed with absolute versions, and this for me was a perfect absolute, because it is just oversized art, the story is engrossing, the design of the slipcase and the book are fantastic, everything is absolutely perfect about this book. I got no qualms whatsoever. And so if you are on the fence about delving into the world of Planetary via the Absolute editions, then I wouldn't be. Get it and you wouldn't regret it really at all. It really is super fulfilling, and it never ever does what you expect it to do. Even the kind of culmination of all the story arcs and this big kind of story arc coming to a conclusion, it concludes in a way that you wouldn't expect, and the final issue is a final issue that you wouldn't expect. And yeah, the extras at the back of the book are pretty much consigned to, you know, full covers of different Planetary versions and alternative colours and artwork, and then a full script from Warren Ellis, and that's pretty much it. It's not really overly kind of packed with extras. I will leave it there, and thank you very much for watching, and I'll catch you on the next one.